Okay.
All right, Assalamu alaikum, everybody.
Salam.
Sorry, we're having some internet issues, but we got everything together, so we're gonna go ahead and get started, inshallah. رب اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقهوا قولي ربي زدني علما ربي زدني علما ربي زدني علما. So we are continuing on. Well, welcome back to Soul Food. For those of you who are new, welcome to the first session of Soul Food. For you, we are continuing on studying this book by Imam al Ghazali, and it's called Ayyuhal Walad. So it's basically a book where that has now been compiled into a book, but it's a list of advices that he gives to his student. And the interesting thing about this is that, when you're reading a book that's intended for a reader, there's a certain way that different thought processes and different things are presented. In this particular book or that we're reading, it's not presented for a reader because it's talking about an actual interaction that has occurred, right? And you are probably wondering, like, if we've been going through this for so many weeks, this is a very long conversation that has been had in the past, but that is something that you actually don't find it to be very abnormal, especially when it comes to Islamic literature. So you'll find that a lot of Islamic literature has been compiled by actually the students of the teachers. So nowadays we publish our own books and things of that nature. Like if someone's very good at a topic or they're very good in a subject or they are well versed in something, they may publish their own publication. But back then, they would teach, and their students would then write and publish that for them. So you have that. This is one of those types of situations. So we are in the 21st advice. I spent like 40 minutes telling Ustad Abdurrahman that no, we're starting in the 20th advice. And he's like, okay, whatever you want, whatever you say. And then I looked and I was like, actually, we're starting in the 21st. You're right. Okay. Fasting brain, right? So we're in the 21st advice. And this particular advice comes after a very long um, portion of the book. And the long portion of the book is that he has gone through a lot of preliminary things. He has gone through things like when it comes to how do you dedicate yourself to God. He's talked about the Tahajjud. And I feel like that was like super powerful that we spent time talking about that in Ramadan because it was like a good time to like really build that part of you. So he talks about dhikr, going through the remembrance of God and how to have that remembrance. And then he talks about, different people who observe different things from other people, mentorships, the importance of when you're accompanying someone or having a level of companionship, that you're getting something out of that situation. You're not just blinded or you're not just blind following, but rather you're paying attention to the world around you. And after talking about all of that and kind of giving us awareness of ourselves and who we are and where we can build from there. Now he spends time talking about devotion to God. Okay. Now he says, all right, since I've given you all of these tools before, and this is not the end of the book, so he gives this advice, but he has so many other things to say after this. He tells us to now spend time devoting yourself to Allah. So he says, Billahi intasir ترى العجائب في كل منزل. He says that if you decide to rush towards Allah, or you decide to really dedicate yourself towards God, or if you travel the world and you see, okay, if you travel around, you will see that there's so many things to be amazed by, right? If you travel, you will see that there's so many things to be amazed by. Why do you think he chose the verbiage of traveling? Oh, my questions are not rhetorical for the new people. And for the old people, I'm back. I said that 2 weeks ago and then I didn't come the following week, but I'm back. Okay. Why do you think he chose the verbiage of traveling? If you travel, you will see and you'll be amazed by the things around you. And we're talking in the context of devotion to God.
So I guess what you mean from traveling is like going somewhere you haven't gone before, so like an undiscovered area. And usually when you're in a new area, you're more aware of your surroundings. But if you're in the same place, everything kind of so you didn't really notice that they want to.
Very good. Usually when you travel, you get exposure to other things, right? And I think Ustad Abdurrahman covered this a little bit before in the previous session, where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, do you not travel around the earth and see? I think what the author is calling us to is to devote ourselves to Allah. When you are in a situation where maybe it's very tough, it's very hard situation, sometimes you're very blinded. You don't see any blessings, you don't see anything good. You're like, this is my life. It sucks, and it constantly has sucked, and I don't know how to get out of this, right? But then you maybe go somewhere else, change your environment. Maybe you talk to someone from a different perspective, and then you see a different way of looking at that challenge, or you see a different blessing that has come into your life. Sometimes what happens with our devotion to Allah is that we get so mundane in our everyday practice, we get so mundane in just our everyday life, that we forget about how miraculous God is. We forget about how limitless Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is. We forget actually the role that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is supposed to play in our life. So it's very possible that sometimes the opposite effect happens. Things are going great in your life. You're chilling, got your classes on time, got the new job you wanted, all of these things. And it may be that you're catching some of your prayers. But as soon as something goes wrong, what do? Allah, why me? Why me? Things were going so good. They were going so great. But how was your connection to God? How was your dedication to Allah? How is your devotion to Allah, your submission, right? When we call ourselves Muslim, we're saying that we are people who are submitting to Allah. We are devoting ourselves to Allah. What does it mean to devote yourself to Allah? Someone tell me. What does that mean?
To choose.
Okay.
A lot of people are subconsciously choose, but not necessarily. But the intention is present, and you're making a choice to do as a good.
Very good. To make the active decision and choice to choose Allah. Very good. Anybody else? What does it mean to devote yourself to Allah?
To make sacrifices in the dunya for Allah.
Okay. What does that mean?
You're gonna have to give up like some of your things that you have to fight for, maybe some your words and something to devote to Him, so that you build up your relationship.
Very good. It takes a level of sacrifice. That there may be even something that you really want to do. Like you're like, I want to do this. This seems like a very good idea, but it goes against what God has told me to do. And there's no part of you that feels like it logically makes sense why you can or cannot do that thing. But you decide that, okay, I'm going to stop it. I'm not going to do this, or I will, like, only solely because God has told me to do so, right? Your connection and devotion with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, people have different levels of connection, different ways of connecting with God. But you want to constantly feed into your soul. You want to constantly feed into that connection. And an ayah that, that really brings this to my mind is that in Surah Ankabut, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, Inna salata tanha anil fahsha'i wal munkar. That know that prayer, okay, is something that should deter you from doing things that are immoral, from wrong, from corruption, things of that nature. It doesn't mean that prayer makes you perfect, okay, because we're human, right? So I can't say that if you pray, you will never sin again. But this ayah says that know that prayer deters you from these types of immoralities, for doing things, corruption, all this stuff. And when we talk about devotion to Allah, we are devoting ourselves to what God has asked us to do, what God has asked us to stay away from, regardless of how we feel about that situation. It is putting your feelings to the side, but knowing that Allah knows better, right? And sometimes those things creep up into your life. They do. Those mistakes, they creep up. Those sins, they creep up. But what is one thing that can help you keep Allah, at the forefront? What is one thing that can help you keep Allah on your brain? Is your salah. Now, we can say salah in the 2-second prayer that you pray, or the salah that you also pour into to help develop that connection, right? Because it's all about it being real. It's not about it being like fluffy. It's not about it being fake. And we're going to talk about that in a second. But actually pouring into that. When you get to know who Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is more, you're able to develop that relationship with Allah more. When you know, for example, that you're struggling with the situation, or you're struggling with something, or you're struggling with finances, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is Ar-Razaq, He's the one who provides. All of a sudden, that relationship that you have with God took on a different dimension. It took on a different form. It took on a different face. Maybe you're struggling with how you feel about yourself, or how you think people feel about you. And you know that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the all-loving, Al-Wadud. That gives you a different way. It gives you a different feeling towards Allah. Maybe you're struggling with feeling God's mercy. And you read about how merciful He is, and how He has so many different names for Him being merciful in so many different forms. And all of a sudden, your relationship with Allah feels a little bit better. And you're able to pour that into your conversations with Him. You're able to pour that into your dua. You're able to pour that into your salah. And so he tells his student here that you should devote yourself to Allah. He keeps on going by saying, he then quotes basically a scholar of tazkiyah, a scholar of spirituality. And that scholar of spirituality, before that, he says, فَإِنَّ رَأْسَ هَذَا الْأَمْرِ بَذْلُ الرُّوحِ. This is interesting because when you're talking about devotion, it doesn't just say that he doesn't just use the terminology of like submitting yourself. It's a form, right? He doesn't use the terminology of submitting yourself. Rather, he uses the terminology of exerting a lot of energy to like tame something, exerting some energy to like put something into its place. And what this shows is kind of what you were mentioning, is that your devotion to Allah, it doesn't just happen by saying, okay, I'm dedicating myself to God. It doesn't just happen like that. It happens through action, and that action takes energy, and sometimes it's difficult. Sometimes it is a harder struggle. Sometimes there are things that you may not struggle with. Like, I know people who don't struggle with fasting. Like, it's like, oh yeah, fast all Monday, Thursday, I'll fast all the extra days, I'll fast this, I'll do that. Like, it's nothing. It's like, yeah, this is great. Outside of Ramadan fast for me, I'm like, I have to convince myself 4 days ahead. I'm like, you got this, you can do it. I'm like, hype team, texting my friends, like, make sure you remind me that this is what we gotta do. This is how it's going down, Outside of Ramadan, it's like, okay, you're doing this with me because I need to feel like Ramadan. Yeah, I'm that friend that traps my other friends into stuff. I'm like, yeah, we're gonna do this together, and that's it. But there may be other things that I may not struggle with. So your devotion to Allah, there will be parts of it that have ease, that is easy, that you're like, I can do this. This makes sense. And there are parts of it that are just faith-based. They're literally a leap of faith. You don't understand it, and you're like, this is very difficult for me, but this is me submitting myself and sacrificing what I think I know for knowing that Allah knows better. And then he continues and he says that this scholar of Tazkiyah, he told one of his students, "In qadarta ala badl ruh fata'ala." If you feel like you're ready to devote your soul, devote yourself to Allah, submit yourself to God, do what God has asked you to do, and try your best to stay away from what God has asked you to stay away from, and really just be there, be in that relationship between you and Allah, then you can come. Then come to me and I'll be your teacher, basically. And then he says, وَإِلَّا, but if you don't, فَلَا تَسْتَغِلْ بِتُرَّحَاتِ الصُّوفِيَّةِ. Then don't busy yourself with like the different kind of like random practices of people who claim spirituality. And the reason why this is very interesting, is a very important point, and this is like my ending point, is because when we think about spirituality and we think about our devotion to Allah, or sometimes we may think about the most pious person we know or we think we know, a lot of it is based off of what we perceive by our eyes as practice. And so sometimes we're like, okay, the way that I have to devote myself to God, or the way that I get closer to Allah, is by doing 100,000 nafil, and doing dhikr to the point where when someone talks to me, I can't reply to them, and being a certain way. I have to be this very excessive way in order to have a relationship with Allah. What the teacher literally told his student is that if you're ready to come, and come as you are, as you are, ready to devote yourself to Allah and just build on who you are, that's fine. But if you're not ready for that, then just don't go to anybody else that's going to give you these random practices, because that is not a true connection with Allah. A true relationship with God is you recognizing that Allah created you to be you. He created you as who you are. But guess what? There are parts of you that can be better. And you're just working on being the best version of yourself. You're working on presenting yourself to Allah on the Day of Judgment with the best product that you could possibly work on, in this world. It's not for you to be a different person. You don't have to go to some scholar and they tell you, hey, Ahmed, now you have to turn into this Muhammad. You don't have to do that. You don't have to do that. That they say, okay, you need to get rid of completely this part of your personality. And it doesn't make sense, because Allah created you with the personality that you have. Allah created you with the character that you have. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala created you with the qualities that you have. And your living in this world is just to develop them to be better. It's just to be the best version of you who God created. And that's part of devoting yourself to Allah. How amazing is it that we're doing this and we're devoting ourselves to Allah, and at the end of the day, the results only benefit us. Doesn't benefit Allah in any way. How incredible is that? And so here he ends off by saying this to his student, that don't get caught up in the facade. Don't get caught up in the flex. It's not real. That your devotion to Allah, and if you're ready to do that, and you're ready to step into that realm, you don't have to be a different person to do that. You can be you, and that's going to help you develop and become the best version of yourself. So that is advice number 21. I think we only have 20 minutes.
Okay.
Sorry.
No problem. No,
One over.
you're good. Okay. Assalamu alaikum. Bismillah walhamdulillah. Salatu wassalamu ala rasulillah wa ala alihi wa ashabihi ajma'in. Okay, so now continuing, Imam al Ghazali, he gives some advice. And Imam al Ghazali's advices are always really good, but they're always very long. And so this is like the last section, or I think there's one more of the book. And the reason why is because he gives 8 things that everyone needs to pay attention to. And before we begin, he says, Inni ansahuka bi thamaniyati ashya, that I'm going to give you advice on 8 things. He says, aqbilha minni, that take them from me, right, and accept them. Yakunu ilmuka khatmaka, that you're going to be able to act upon them and do them in totality with completeness. Okay, but then he says something interesting, and he says that if you don't act on these things, he says that your knowledge will become an enemy from you on the Day of Judgment. So everything that we know, everything that we do, it's something that ultimately is either for us or against us. There's nothing that remains neutral. Okay, if we know that we have to pray Fajr, if we wake up for Fajr, it's for us. But if we don't, it's not just like casual. It's not just like neutral. He says that your knowledge will become your enemy on Yawm al-Qiyamah, that it will become something that stands against you. So everything that we learn has to be seen in that like sort of cautious light. You know, they say ignorance is bliss. It's not true actually, right? Because if we don't know something, then we're not acting accordingly. But if we know something, then we have the responsibility to at least try and act on it, okay? Then he says, تَعْمَلْ مِنْهَا أَرْبَعَةً, act on 4 things. Do 4 of the 8 that I'm going to tell you. And then he says, وَتَدْعُ مِنْهَا أَرْبَعَةً, and repel or stay away from 4 of these things. There is a hadith of the Prophet ﷺ, he says that that whatever I have forbidden from you, stay away from it. and whatever I've commanded you to do, then do it as much as you can within your ability. What is the concept of, what do you guys think about doing good versus staying away from bad? Which one is better to do? Doing good or staying away from bad? Okay, who thinks it's doing good? Doing something good is better. Now, they're both good. I'm not saying one's bad, one's good. They're both great. If you stay away from something bad, it's good. But who thinks it's better to do good? Okay, why?
You don't know the reward Allah is going to give you.
Okay.
Might be multiple, and it's always, as long as you're like this, so we'll talk about that. So.
Good, yeah. Excellent. Good points. Anyone else? Okay. Very good. Anyone else?
I feel like when you do good, it naturally repels you from doing it.
Okay. Interesting. These are good thoughts. Anyone else? Who thinks it's better for a person to be able to stay away from something bad than it is to do something good? Why do you think that?
Staying away from bad is, I think, somewhat good as well.
It is very good. Yeah, of course. But why do you think it's... Yeah. Oh, interesting. I see what you're saying. Okay. It's like an and one. Yeah.
I think staying away from that is getting harder than doing good.
Okay.
So, because there's more difficulty with the hasanat and the ajr might be increased.
Okay. Good thoughts. So, yes.
Today, I guess we're surrounded by badness, like, it kind of creeps into your subconscious, you know? It's harder to do good, or sometimes you might not differentiate, it might, like, you might know the knowledge, but then, like, as time goes on and on, you're surrounded by bad, it's like, that's what you're seeing more, so you have to make a conscious effort and work harder to do good, so bad makes it harder to do good.
That's very interesting that you said that. So there's actually no like conclusively, definitively right answer, but there are like some of the great scholars of hadith, when they looked at the hadith of the Prophet ﷺ, he said, you know, whatever I've forbidden from you, don't do it. Whatever I've commanded you to do for whatever you can, right? Ma istata'tum, whatever you are able to do. So the scholars actually, they got together and they discussed, okay, what do you think is better, staying away from bad or doing good? And they said that foundationally, trying to stay away from something that is evil is in its own way more critical than even doing good deeds. Why? Now we know that, again, like I said, both we have to do. But the point you brought up, what was your name? Isra. The point you brought up is very important, very crucial, something we don't think about. Doing a bad deed and doing something wrong, it doesn't just disappear. You know, it's not like I say something bad or I backbite or I curse or I do, and then it's like, oh, okay, it's done. Like, let me just go on about my way. That's not how it works. When I do something wrong, that thing lives within me. And that thing, the Prophet ﷺ said that, it makes a blemish on the heart of a person. And the heart ultimately is the decision maker of the body. And so when I do something wrong and my heart is covered in these blemishes, have you guys ever driven and your windshield is dirty and you don't have windshield wiper fluid?
Oh my God.
And you have to get out and like pour some water on it and then like, you know what I'm talking about? How difficult is it to see clearly when you have dirt all over your windshield? You can't. And so the heart can't function towards the beauty of doing good, righteous deeds if it's covered in blemishes. And so what you said is actually very key, which is sometimes, right, doing things that are wrong actually repels us from being able to do something that is right. Okay? If we stay out all night, you know, late night doing something that's wrong, what is the likelihood of waking up for Fajr and praying? It's pretty low, right? But when you have what I call a hiatus Friday, which is you don't go out, you don't do it, you just kind of go to sleep at a normal time, the likelihood of you waking up for Fajr on time is much higher, right? Because you made the decision to stay away from things. Again, staying up late is not forbidden, but you all know what I mean, right? So the scholars say, try your best to at least foundationally stay away from the wrong things. And then, like the Prophet ﷺ said, whatever you're able to do from the good deeds, right? So prayer, fasting, of course, obviously, sadaqah, all these 5 pillars that we know, and anything else. But the least you can do is hold yourself back. The other reason why it's more challenging to do something good is because it takes like motivation and action, as opposed to just not doing something. I'll give you another example, right? Days that I work out, okay, I'm like, man, I have to work out, I gotta exercise. Or I'm like, I could just not eat bad food today. I'll just eat lettuce all day, right? Days where I know I can't go exercise, I just keep my intake very low that day because I know that I can't go do that good. So sometimes being able to hold back, like you said, is like a 2-for-1, right? If I know, or maybe I can't go earn some extra money, so I'm just gonna stop spending. Because I know that if I don't have enough hours that week at work to make it up, then I just can't outgo. I'm gonna have to, rice and lentils it is at home. You know what I mean?
I don't know why people do that. Rice and lentils is like
I like
bomb.
it, by the way.
It's
I like
bomb,
it. It's part of the reason
right?
why I am the size that I am. Because I like rice and lentils. Okay.
I like go to my friend's house and they're like, "Oh, you want dal chawal?" Like, we're not feeding you that. I'm like, "That's what I want."
Yeah,
though. They're
yeah.
Like, we're not poor.
Especially
I'm
if it's
like,
good.
No, but that's what I want.
Especially if it's
That's what I
good.
want.
So the reality is that being able to like hold yourself back is its own skill. So Imam al Ghazali, that's why he says, "Ta'mal arba'atan wa tad'u arba'atan," that to do 4, but also to stay away from 4. So he's teaching us now. There's 4 things I need you to do, and there's 4 things I need you to stay away from. So what does he say? The first he says is, do not dispute. ألا تناظر أحدا في مسائل ما استطعت. That do not argue with people. Don't become a argumentative person as much as you are able to do so. Okay? لأن فيها آفات كثيرة. That because in argumentation, the majority of what you'll find at the end of an argument is just destructive things, bad things. Is it possible that an argument can lead to something good? Yes, but how many times out of 100 does an argument lead to good things? Isn't it shocking when you argue with somebody and things are okay at the end? It's like a shock. You're like, wow, we're still friends. Why do we feel that way? Because arguments generally lead to bad things. So he says, look, the first thing I'm going to tell you is stay away from. He's not even saying do this. He's just saying don't do this. Right? So he's giving you the 4 things to stay away from first. Number 1, do not argue. Do not become people who argue and dispute as much as you can. Now, there will be some times where you're going to have to, take the gloves off and go into the ring, right? There will be some times where you're going to have to do that. That's fine. But if you do it all of the time, if you're constantly arguing, then that time will not even matter. People will just say, here they go again, right? It's kind of like, I was telling my wife, we were talking about like parenting and like our kids, and we're like, it's like a halftime, we have to like re-figure out our strategy every day. So it's like, all right, what are we gonna do? What are we gonna do? And one thing that we've set on from the very beginning that we are really, really trying to be good about is not yelling at kids, not yelling. You know why? Because when you yell at kids, and many of you probably have this experience, maybe even growing up, and Allah bless our parents. When you yell at kids, then you know what? Yelling stops mattering. It stops. Like if they yell at you because you left the cabinet open or you drank poison, like the weight of the yelling is irrelevant, right? But if a person can maintain their emotional state and remain very even, and even when they're a little bit disappointed, their voice doesn't go up. They just kind of say, well, I really wish you didn't do that, like that. Then when naturally a person gets very shocked and upset and their voice may get higher, what is the impact of that moment? It's much greater, much, much greater. And this is why the Prophet ﷺ, he was so kind and merciful and generous to kids and people and everybody that when he had a moment, like something seriously went down. Okay, Al-Hasan al-Hussein radiallahu anhuma, they were so beloved to the Prophet ﷺ. He used to do so many things for them, dude. He used to let them climb him during salah. He used to let them play. They used to run around the masjid. He even one time, the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ came down from the member of the masjid during khutbah because he saw Al-Hussein radiallahu anhu. He was stumbling over his shirt, like his clothes, basically. He picked him up and he said, this is going to be a leader of this ummah, right? So he had so much love for his 2 grandchildren, Okay, you saw it all the time. They would climb on his back during sujood, and he would extend his sajda. Like, that's just love. One time they had baskets of dates that were gathered for charity, for zakat, that they were going to distribute to the people in need. And his grandchildren, these same grandchildren that he loved, they reached to the baskets of date to grab some dates, because dates are like candy. I mean, they're sweet, right? When they did that, he grabbed their hands gently and he said, don't do that. And they looked at him and he said, this is for charity. This is not for us. What do you think the moment felt like? They instantly, of course, listened, because every other experience they had with their grandfather, right, with the Prophet ﷺ, was what? He was so relaxed. He was so chill. Even things that people thought would, make him snap, never did. So when he did get a little stern, people took him very seriously. So here Imam al Ghazali is saying, if you're constantly bickering and fighting and arguing and clapping back at people all the time, every single syllable that you utter loses importance. Right? Okay? So that's the first thing he says. And he says that the source of all argumentation, okay, is he says فَإِثْمُهَا أَكْبَرُ مِنْ نَفْعِهَا. The evil from argument is greater than all the good that you can accomplish from it. It's always greater than all the good you can accomplish from it. He says إِذْ هِيَ مَنْبَعُ كُلِّ خَلْقٍ ذَمِيمٍ. That the source of argumentation is all these ugly characteristics. And he starts to name them. He says, number one, riya, showing off. Why do people argue, especially in front of others? Because they want to win. No one argues in private. People want to respond in the comments. They want to tweet back at people. They want to, do all this stuff in public because they kind of want the audience. They want that specter. They want people liking their comments and whatever, right? I remember one time there was a person that I used to, an athlete that I used to follow, and he said something really dumb online. So I commented, and my comment ended up having more likes than his post, right? Like, people were just, but then all of his supporters came, it was political, of course. And then all his supporters came out and was like, blah, blah, they started going back and forth. And I started going back and forth. And then I was just started destroying them one by one. You know what I mean? Just started deconstructing one by one. One by one, right? This is people, man. No IQ. And then I looked at myself and I was like, why are you doing this? What award are you winning for this? Some fake applause that you hear in your head every time you hit submit or enter. What the heck? I literally started criticizing myself. I'm like, you're a maniac. What are you doing? I have 2 children that I could be spending time with. I have a wife that I could be spending time with. I got friends. Why are you sitting here and just commenting? Right? And if you really care about somebody and you have to say something, it doesn't have to be in public. So karriya, he says number 1. Then he says number 2, wal hasad. A lot of times we argue because we're jealous of people. Right? We go at them because we're jealous of them. Wal kibr, and arrogance. Or we might think that we're better than them. And we want to demonstrate that we think we're better than them. Okay? And he says, what adawati, or we're just hostile towards everybody. And in another book, another author, he says something very beautiful. He says that when a person argues, they just become like an angry animal. And he says eventually they lose all their friends, they lose all their family, and no one likes them, and they start to hate everybody, and they die alone. That's it. And maybe, you know what, maybe it's not that dramatic, but there are some people that if their family could, they would let them die alone. They would. They won't, because they have some honor and some dignity in themselves. But there are some people that are so difficult to live with and talk with and be with that when the person passes away, the family, they breathe a sigh of relief. May Allah protect us from being that. Do you want to be that person that when you walk out of a room, everyone's like, oh, thank God. When you walk in the room, everyone's like, oh God, getting ready just to get picked apart, needlessly criticizing, making fun of somebody, needlessly, losing your temper on people. This is something that Imam al Ghazali says it all comes from this characteristic. So he says, stay away from that. Okay. And then he says that Of course, he clarifies the exception. What's the exception, he says? He says that if there's going to be an issue, لو وقع مسائلة بينك وبين شخص, if there's some sort of disputive question between you and somebody else, then yes, of course, he says, أو قوم, or a people, and he says that, and your goal in that moment is to what? And تظهر الحق. All you want to do is talk about the truth. That's it. It's not about me versus you. All you want to do is say, look, there's some confusion here. What's the real answer? Okay? So Maghrib time, when is it? 8:08, 8:18. There's two groups. No, I think it's this, I think it's that. Nobody cares about winning the battle. You just want to know when you can pray Maghrib, right? No one cares about who gets the award. There's no gold or silver medal here, right? Then he says, then it's okay for you to engage in that discussion, engage in that conversation, as long as your heart is in the right place, okay? But he says there's two signs. You want to know what the two signs are? When is it okay to argue? He says that جاز البحث, that discussion where you guys are searching for the right answer is okay. He says لكن لتلك الإرادة العلامتان, that you have to know that there are two things, two signs that show that your desire is good. Number one, he says ألا تفرق بين أن ينكشف الحق على لسانك أو على لسان غيرك. You don't care if the truth comes from your tongue or the person's tongue. So if I'm arguing with you, I actually don't care if you win or I win. Can you imagine that? How sincere do you have to be? You know, it's there are moments, by the way, where you feel this. There are some arguments. You guys know what I'm talking about, or am I just speaking hot air? You guys ever want to like win an argument with somebody?
Yes.
Yes? Okay. I feel like sometimes like everyone here is like, what kind of weird, kind of arrogant guy is talking right now? You guys ever want to win an argument before with somebody? Okay. Siblings. Okay. Yeah. Have you guys ever gotten into a situation where you don't really care who wins, you just want to know what the truth is? Okay. So do you know the difference now? The difference is in one of those moments, you are the center. In one of those moments, you're not even there. Like if you're running late for a flight, you're trying to figure out which gate it is. No one cares if it's D10 or D8. You know what I mean? Like if you win or I win, let's go check. I think it's this, I think it's that. Listen, I actually don't care. I hope, so one of us is right. I hope that we're not at the wrong airport, right? That's all I care about at this point. So that's what he's saying. He says what? He says, لا تفرق, sorry. You don't mind if what? بين أن يكشف الحق على لسانك أو على لسان غيرك. Doesn't matter to you. It's the same, whether or not the truth appears on your tongue or that person's tongue. And then he says, والثانية أن يكون البحث في الخلاء أحب إليك من أن يكون في الملاء. Wow. He says that it would be more beloved to you to have this conversation in private than it would for you to be having it in public. So you know you're right. You know that you could, if you wanted to, slam dunk on this person. You know that you could, if you wanted to, make them look like a fool. But you actually, in your heart, would prefer just to be able to pull this person to the side, take them to another room, call them after, DM them, not comment, and just settle it there. Instead of settling it where? In front of the boys, right? Or in front of everybody. Because you actually don't want that to happen. You don't need the, what was his name? He was really popular on Vine, like in 2008. Hot Fire. What was his name? Super Hot Fire. Yeah. You don't need that. If you don't know what I'm talking about, you missed out on a major cultural icon in the 2000s. Super Hot. You know what I'm talking about? The rap battles where nothing he said made sense, but his boys just went nuts every time.
Yes.
And then at the end, they went crazy. You're not looking for your boys to go crazy at the end. In fact, you actually don't want that because you know, and there's something really wise about this. You know, when you debate somebody or argue with somebody, whether it's like somebody at work or school or home or whatever, what you do in front of people can never be erased. It can never be taken away. I was actually having a very interesting conversation recently with somebody, and it shows the maturity of this person that they had. I was talking to them about something. Actually, it was a marital situation, and there was a divorce that was happening. And unfortunately, this person was friends with the person getting divorced. So it was very difficult for them. And in the divorce, there were mean things said both sides, right? And so we started talking. I was talking to this one person. They themselves were not getting divorced, but they were commenting. It was their friend. They said, man, if someone ever said something about me, like if I was getting divorced, I'd want to just spill everything I knew about that person. And then she caught herself. And she said, you know what? I wouldn't do that. And I said, why? Because she caught herself like within like 5 seconds. She's like, I would just say everything. And she's like, no, I wouldn't do that. I said, what changed your mind? And she said, when you do that to somebody, it doesn't matter if it's true or false, you can never take it back. It's gone. Once those words leave your mouth. So if you debate somebody or argue with somebody and it's in front of people and you basically, let's say you win, right? Or you know that you're right and they're wrong. The more honorable and prophetic thing to do would be to try to preserve their honor before the eyes of people, right? And sometimes, by the way, the crazy reaction you get from somebody because they can't handle it is because it's in front of people anyways. People respond very, very difficult, very negative when there's an audience because it's not just the truth on the line, it's their honor. But if you're able to be smart about it and strategic and do it in a way that preserves their dignity and honor, then you'll find that the argument itself becomes a lot less intense, a lot less problematic. So here you have Imam al Ghazali saying, just stay away from arguing. But if you have to, do it this way. So we'll end here, inshallah. We'll conclude. We ask Allah Ta'ala to accept from us. We ask Allah Subhanahu wa Ta'ala to make our hearts pure and to give us the love of the truth and the hatred of argumentation. We ask Allah Subhanahu wa Ta'ala to make us people that our character is always beautiful and our character is attractive and magnetic and we never push people away. We ask Allah Ta'ala to forgive us for the shortcomings we've had in our hearts, with our tongues, using our thumbs, texting people. We ask Allah Subhanahu wa Ta'ala to protect us from all of the people that we've pushed away. We ask Allah Ta'ala to make us a proof of Quran, a proof of Islam, a proof of the Sunnah, and not a proof against any of those things. We ask Allah Ta'ala to accept from us. And on this blessed day of Ashura, we ask Allah Subhanahu wa Ta'ala to uplift the Ummah, uplift those who are oppressed, to save them from the shackles of tyranny that they experience across the world. We ask Allah Subhanahu wa Ta'ala to grant us this freedom from oppression and tyranny, externally and also internally within our own selves. Ameen, ameen, ya Rabbil Alameen. Anyone have any questions? We have like 4 minutes before Maghrib. Alhamdulillah. Who asked?
Oh.
Always ask, mashallah. Loving it. Can't see the mouth, so yeah.
So when it comes to arguing, sometimes people are put in this position where they're not choosing to argue. Whether it be like defending someone, right, defending Islam, defending, sometimes people come at you with a certain type of energy.
Yeah.
Right? And you're just there to, travel, right? Like you said. How do you go about one, diffusing it, or two, deflecting, right? Any kind of like outrageous comments or things that might be representative of yourself?
I'll say one thing and then Ustadh can answer. I've become very good at one thing, which is like just take the L and walk away.
Yeah.
I just don't care, And it's hard. It's hard, especially when you're a principled person. Because I used to be very angry when people would just be wrong for the sake of them being wrong. I'm like, what? But why? They're wrong. They're wrong. And then I just learned, like, if it's not going to matter in 5 minutes, don't spend 5 hours on it, right? Or 5 seconds even on it. Just let it be. So if someone tries to come at you or say something, whatever, and ultimately it's not even a big deal, just be like, Jazakallah khair. You're right. So if someone comes at me, they say something, I'm like, you're right. Wow. They're like, no, say something back. I'm like, can't. You're right. Slam dunk. Got me. Right? I'm like, you win. So, and it ultimately is just a very it's a deflating process. You have anything on?
Yeah, I completely agree. I'm not an argumentative person by nature, simply because I have way too many siblings to be arguing. It's just really not worth the time. So I got that training very young. But when you're in the community, you're working and serving community and stuff like that, sometimes it does get a little bit tough. And I'll never forget there was a time where there's this young person or whatever, he cornered me and the imam that I was working with in the office to ask us like questions about like debate questions about spirituality. And I was just sitting there, and the imam went back and forth with him. And then the boy turns to me and he's like, "You don't have anything to say to like defend Islam?" I was like, "No, I don't have anything to say. Like, you've said it all. Like you came in with your own preconceived notions. Like when someone's so angry or so upset or they're convinced of something, you're not going to unconvince them by what you say, right?" So I did offer to the young man, if you would like to have a very calm conversation, I'm willing to spare 20 minutes for that conversation for your own good. I'm not getting anything out of this. I'm not trying to convince him of the right way of seeing the light. I'm not a debater. Like, that's just not me. And I think part of it is laziness. Because halfway through the conversation, I'm like done. I'm like, okay, cool story, bro. I gotta go now, type of thing. But a big part of it is like what Sad mentioned, is not only preserving the dignity of that person, but preserving your own dignity too.
Mm-hmm.
You know, like I don't have time for someone to rile me up where I get to a point where I can't even control what I say to that person. And what am I doing in the name of Islam, right? So at that point, it really defeats the purpose of why I decided to argue with that person in the first place. Jazakallah khairan, barakallahu feekum. Dhikr talk is amazing. Why? Because you're making dua for that person. May Allah make it easy for all of us. May Allah accept. Yes, thank you. Assalamu alaikum. Have a blessed day. Be blessed. Whatever. Like it's fine. That's me. I would jazakallah khairan somebody real quick. Jazakallah khairan, barakallahu feekum. Gotta go.
They get so upset.
They do, and I honestly I leave.
You know what they call that? You know what they call that, by the way? They call that pulling the chair out from somebody. You guys ever heard that before? It happened in basketball a lot. Like in the post, whenever anyone puts all their weight on you, one of your responses, you can like push back, or you can just step out of the way. And what happens is when someone's putting a ton of weight on you, step out of the way, they just fall down, right? They call that pulling the chair. So like you can do it in debate too. Like somebody's coming at you real hard with something, you could just be like, Jazakallah khairan. And what do they say that? No? You're literally saying, may Allah give you goodness. You're like, no khairan, no Jazakallah khairan. You're like, Jazakallah khairan, Jazakallah khairan. MashaAllah, MashaAllah, MashaAllah. Now don't do it like condescending like I'm doing, right?
No.
Right? But just be like, Jazakallah, I really appreciate it.
I sincerely mean it.
Yeah.
I try to sincerely mean it in my heart.
Nice, good catch.
I try to sincerely mean it. I'm like, may Allah make things easy for you. That's like, and I want whatever it is that's disrupting you so much that you felt like you have to come and attack me, a person that you don't even know. I would really like for those demons to be removed from you. So because honestly.
Are you exercising them? Because the exorcism, she's like, be gone, shaitan.
Listen, energy, vibes are real, okay? Like, I don't need those type of vibes, and I don't need anybody else to have those type of vibes. So I pray for them. I'm like, may Allah make it easy. Honestly, I can't. And if they come at me with questions, because it happens, like, why this? I'm like, honestly, I cannot answer your question. I don't have the answer for you. I'm not. This is the extent that I'm qualified to answer your question. I can't answer it for you. However, I do know that, like, I want Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to give you peace, and I pray that God gives you peace. Keep it pushing. 9 times out of 10, it doesn't get that far because I've already left the conversation. Like, Fatima has exited the group chat.
Yeah, good question, though. Anybody else?
One more?
If anyone's fasting, it's Maghrib time, so we can break fast, inshallah. We have crispy crunchy and we have patties. You guys know what patties are? Patties. It's basically like meat stuffed in like puff pastries. I think every culture has a version of it. They call it fatir in Egypt. Similar to fatir, kind of. Sort of. Okay. Barakallahu feekum, everybody, inshallah. And then after that, we'll do Maghrib. Okay. Assalamu alaikum. Good talk, guys. Good talk. Drink your milk. Go to school.
I got a message
From who? Oh, yeah. Hold on.